My name is Satyendra Pakhale. I was born in India, in the center of India. I went to school in another city called Nagpur, with study engineering and then design. And after that, I came to Europe. I went to school in Switzerland, French-speaking part of Switzerland, and then lived and worked in different places from Germany to Italy to New York, and then decided to work from Amsterdam. So we work from Amsterdam. We work with lots of international companies, classifying projects from industrial project, cultural project, educational projects. And also parallel to these kind of commission projects, which is the industrial design international practice, what we also spend and investigate and put a lot of effort into personal exploration of experimental projects, of making things, challenging the possibilities and boundaries of innovation in terms of making, interpretation, symbology, sensorial quality of object. So there's a lot of work goes into that as well. So there are always parallel two kinds of works happening in the studio here in Amsterdam, and worked in collaboration with a lot of craftspeople around the world in different places, and using different techniques and materials, new and old, without classifying them as good or bad or better or worse, whatever way, but to look at world in a very homogeneous, singular way, and using those ways of making, interpretations, materials, symbols, possibility of different cultural notions, and evolving new kind of objects, hopefully in new form language, hopefully a new interpretation of the world. What we always said that we have to look into a cultural identity, and cultural identity is much more fascinating and much more multi-layered. And when I say culture, it's always in a plural sense, not in a singular sense. That means it's multi-layered, it's organic, it's always cultivating, developing, interpreting in different kind of directions. That means culture is not a singular idea, it's not a fixed notion. It's always cultivating, it's always becoming something else, and that becomes a very dynamic way of looking at the world, And when we look at creation from that perspective, that will become very fascinating, and that's what I try to do in the work, that to kind of understand this multi-layered way of living in a way of I mean, again, we have standard words for that, which doesn't really appeal to me, so-called multiculturalism or so-called cosmopolitan, things like that. I mean, this is in some sense makes sense, but at the same time it has its own limitations, So what we really need to have is a plural, open human understanding of different ways of living, and take the best out of it, and then what we would have is the perfect blend, combination or marriage, if you like to call, of different interpretation, possibilities, languages, symbols, and therefore hopefully innovation, a cultural innovation. In the last years, actually, I always cultivated this habit of doing aquarelle drawing every day in the morning when I come to the studio. The idea is really almost to clean up your mind. It's almost a meditative act to do a simple drawing, and it's not a drawing for a project. Sometimes it is for the project, sometimes it is just a kind of a scribble, a kind of a simple water sketch.
Can you say that again, all the way from the beginning?
Yeah.
Every morning?
Yeah. Or last years I cultivated the habit of doing a simple aquarelle sketch, a watercolor sketch in the morning. It is almost to cultivate idea, thought, to clean up your mind, almost a meditative act in a way, to draw, to create symbols, to create forms, to create all these kind of gestures in a way. And why aquarelle? Aquarelle is a very living medium, extremely difficult and tough, those who know how to draw with aquarelle, and therefore very challenging, and it's very fascinating to do these simple, almost calligraphy-like drawings, almost simple doodles in a watercolor actually. And design for me is not a profession. Design for me is not a profession. It's a way of life. It's a curiosity. It's a way of doing things. It's a way of creating something. But it's never a profession in a cut and dry way, in a competence way, in a way that it's almost a way of thinking, way of being, almost satisfying one's curiosity in that way, So design in that sense for me is there's always idea of a design is there's always a consideration for technological, ecological, sustainable issues. At the same time, there's always a motivation of social, issues, cultural parameters, and above all, this is a kind of a notion I'm always interested in. And as much as I'm interested in all these issues like social, technological, ecological, industrial, and all cultural parameters, but as much as it is driven by those issues, but it's also driven by purely creative vision, almost the kind of consistent form language, the exploration in sensorial quality of materials, and trying to create iconic forms, a kind of identity, almost a new identity, redefined identity, which will hopefully last in terms of symbols, objects, quality of object, and at the same time it has to work on a fundamental utilitarian level, that it has to just to be useful as object, So these things are done in a different ways, and this is done in a different way in a personal self-initiated projects, which requires tremendous amount of work, passion goes into making it, which we'll talk about it in the workshops. And at the same time, the commission industrial projects. Now the trouble with the industrial projects is the industrial vision is always very limiting, almost very based on a short-term objectives. And I would really like and challenge industry in terms of to have a faith in designer, to be able to conceive a product almost in a strategic perspective, on a bigger picture, and consider object in a much bigger picture, and make that as a pure core strategy of a company. Now that is hardly seen actually, but in some projects we did get opportunity to do that actually. And now the objective would be to design objects which go beyond just the objects, everyday objects and furniture. And my keen interest is to apply this experimentation, understanding, exploration into truly industrial products, which are products which our system, transportation system, that is something I'm very fascinated by. Something which we can really apply all this knowledge and create something in a complete holistic manner, which will truly become a sustainable system actually. I'm interested in fundamentally power generation. Their industrial design could be very, very helpful. And I'm interested in a mass manufactured markets, in a consumer electronics, digital technology, things like that. And we have a lot to contribute to that kind of areas actually. And unfortunately, design used in those areas is traditionally in a very conformistic manner, if you allow me to say that. And conformist manner in a very, very restricted way, almost in a old-fashioned orthodox way. And the whole exploration in a design practice, what we have here is really to go beyond these perceived notions, the fixed ideas, the cultural perception of a specific technology or a material or a product or a typology, but to rethink in a very playful way, in a refreshing way, in a multi-layered way, multicultural way, if you like to call it, and try to do innovation in a different way. The innovation could be then in a object, innovation could be in a form of a typology, it could be in a form of a material or a technology, or it could be reinterpretation of a material or technology, or it could be even a symbolic innovation, a new form language, a new interpretation, a new identity. And I hopefully that is the way to go about in design, and rethink our environment in a pure sustainable way, and not to make a big fuss about so-called sustainable design, but purely do a good design which people will cherish and will not throw, and it is built in such a nice manner that you really feel the quality, you really feel the care and passion and allow gone into making something. And that is the kind of design vision I would like to pursue and practice, hopefully for all the rest of my life.